right, everybody, welcome back to Earth Science Lab. I am Mrs. Ritz, for those of you who don't know me. You are tuning into the Sedimentary Rock Lab, and I know for most of you, this is the first time you've done a virtual lab. So I hope this goes okay, and if you have any questions, like always, please feel free to call, text, email, or message in chat. You can either message me, Mr. Miga, or Mr. Winters, or Mr. D for help on any of these. So let's get started. So as always, you can find these labs in Teams. So remember to hold down the control button while clicking the link. That'll get you right to the document. You can either print that document if you have access to a printer or read it right online. So you're going to start by reading the entire reading. This time it is only the first page and a tiny bit there on the second page. You will answer the 5 questions that go with it. Now, like all the other labs we've done this year, those are document-based questions, meaning the answers to those 5 pre-lab questions you'll find word for word pretty much in the reading. So again, make sure you get the answers to those questions from the reading. After that, the directions do start off for the activity. You will start this investigation by looking at the properties of sedimentary rocks. So the procedure here says obtain the sedimentary rock samples from your instructor. Unfortunately, you can't get the actual rocks this year, but as you're going to see in a little bit, I'm going to show you those rocks right here on the video. You will complete the report sheet and use your Earth Science reference table page 7 and a little bit of page 6 to help you out. Mine, I printed this before I decided to change it up, so it will start with, you're going to find the texture of the sedimentary rock, followed by the grain size, whether it has fossils, name the rock, and then you're going to tell me the composition of that rock. You can follow along right with that on Teams, and it's just a multiple choice there, so that'll be pretty easy. So once you complete this, you are done with the table, and then there are several post-lab questions, including a handful of old Regents questions about mostly sedimentary rocks. Make sure you read the questions and use your reference tables for all the questions. This is due next week, meaning you will have this 1 week to complete this, and we will start the Metamorphic Rock Lab next week. So let's go ahead and we'll get started with the table that you'll find on page 3. And again, this is how you're going to be identifying the sedimentary rocks. You will want to use your Earth Science reference table. This is the one that I have handy. So remember, with texture, you have 3 choices: clastic, crystalline, and bioclastic. Grain size is very important when we're talking about these rocks on the top half of this chart, because these are what is going to identify them as shale, siltstone, sandstone, breccia, conglomerate, and rock. Breccia and conglomerate. These are all determined by their grain size. Down on the bottom half, it's not quite as important because rock salt, rock gypsum, and dolostone have the same grain size, as do limestone and bituminous coal. They have the same grain size. Composition is right here on the reference table, and then the rock names are on there. So make sure you use your reference table as we go along. If at any point you need to pause the video to take a minute to look a little longer at your reference table and the rock, please go ahead and do so. And if you need any other detailed pictures of the rock, make sure you go ahead and give me a call or a text message, and I can get you different pictures of the rock if that would help. So let's start with texture. As you'll see, this is going to be rock A here. So this is rock A. And we're going to start the texture with, again, your 3 choices are clastic, crystalline, and bioclastic. So you're going to decide which this is. I'm going to give you a couple hints here. Hopefully this camera will zoom in good for me. If you can see what these are, these little tiny pieces, oh, that's a good shot right there. I know it looks good for me. I don't know if I can make it look good for you, though. I'll put my hand there. Oh, it does not turn out great. Oh, there we go. Can you tell what that is? If you can't, I'll let you know. That is a piece of a seashell. All of these are little tiny pieces of seashells. So hopefully that will help you determine if that is crystalline, bioclastic, or clastic. After that, we're going to be talking about the grain size. So we need your choices again are whether it's clay, silt, sand, pebbles, cobbles, and boulders embedded in sand, silt, or clay, or fine to coarse crystals, or microscopic to very coarse. This should be a hint since this is made out of seashells. You're really only going to be narrowed down to one option, so that might help you. Again, if you need to pause while you look at your reference table, go ahead and pause the video. The next box over is whether there are fossils. Now, make sure you know what a fossil is. A fossil is not pieces of a seashell. These are shell fragments. These are not fossils. A fossil would be bits of a bone or an embedded footprint or leaf print that would be left behind. Shell fragments and fossils are actually different. Moving on, next box over is back to the rock name. So rock name again can be determined using the reference table. Once you know the texture, the grain size, and maybe read down the comments section, you should be able to identify the name of this rock. Once you know the name of the rock, you can do the final box for rock A, which is the composition. So go ahead and find the name of this rock and tell me what it's made out of. All right, again, if you need to pause or rewind any of that, go right ahead. I'm going to move on though, and we're going to move on to rock B. Now rock B, hopefully this will focus a little better here for you. I can't make it. All right, so this is rock B. You're going to have to take my word for it that this feels very familiar. Feels like I might want to file my nail on it, or if I had some wood, I might be able to sand it down because this feels just like sandpaper, and that should be a hint to you. If I was to break off pieces of this, I feel something very familiar left behind, so this feels like sand. So that should be a hint to you if this is clastic, crystalline, or bioclastic, as well as determining the grain size, since I gave you that good hint that this feels like sandpaper. Moving on, this one, do you see any fossils in this rock? You should be able to now tell me the name of this rock, given the hints I've given you. And then once you know the name of rock B, you can also go back and tell me the composition of rock B. Again, you're going to want to follow along right on teams because it does only give you a couple choices for composition. It doesn't give you endless amounts of choices. So that's rock B. Again, feel free to pause or rewind as necessary. Moving on to rock C is this very cool looking rock here. Hopefully that focuses in good again. Give it a second. Come on, rock B, you can do it. All right, I think I have to hold this one. Rock B. This rock, maybe if I put a different color behind this, it might look better. Rock B. Oh, that should work good. Close the shades works a little bit better too. All right, rock B, you can see, is made up of all sorts of stuff that look like they were glued together. So it almost looks like a pile of fish tank gravel is sitting here, all cemented together. So that should be a good hint of whether this is, what their texture is of rock C. Is this clastic, crystalline, or bioclastic? Moving on to the grain size, you can see an assortment of grain sizes here. So I have some fairly large pieces right there, but there's also a bunch of tiny pieces in there. So once you figure out what the grain size is, you can move on to whether there are fossils or not. So take a look throughout this rock. Do you see any fossils? You should at this point be able to identify the name of this rock. I did only give you 5 choices for names and 5 rocks that I'm going through here. So I only used each rock once, and it's kind of like a word bank for you there. So if you're not exactly sure, maybe take a look at the choices and do process of elimination as to what rock this could be. So that's rock C. Again, grab the composition once you know the name of it as well. We're going to move on to rock D, which is this one right here. You have to determine its texture. Is it clastic, crystalline, or bioclastic? And take a look at these shiny pieces here. Don't see any other rocks in there. So determine, is this clastic, crystalline, or bioclastic? Again, once you figure that out, you should be able to tell me the grain size. If you aren't sure of the grain size, maybe hold on and figure out the name of this rock, and you can go back and determine the grain size. Take a look. Do you see any fossils in there? And then finally, you can give me a name. Again, I only gave you 5 choices. If you already used quite a few of them, maybe do process of elimination also to help you out with this one. And finally, the composition, once you figure out the name, is pretty easy for this one. So that's rock D. Finally, we are on to rock E. Rock E kind of looks familiar to some of you. This might be one that you have skipped stones with down at the creek one day. We can also notice we have that number 1 there was added by me, but you can see faintly back here in the background, and then some of these have been highlighted a little bit for you. There is some leaf imprints in there, so you can see it almost looks like some sort of fern was pasted onto this rock. So you can determine the texture. So when I feel it, I really don't feel anything. When I break it up, it's a very fine powder. Not much is left behind. So these are pretty small pieces. Then we're going to look again. Do you see any fossils? And based on the 5 options that I gave you, can you determine the name of this rock? And then go back and do the composition for rock E. All right, that was all 5 rocks. Again, if you need to go back to any of those. So again, we have rock E, rock D, rock C, here's B, and then finally A. Again, if you needed to go back to any of those, feel free to rewind and pause as you feel necessary. You are not quite done yet, so if you haven't already answered the 5 pre-lab questions, make sure you do those. And then you also have the post-lab questions. There are a few short answers, so it is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 short answer, followed by 2, 4, 6, 7 multiple choice Regents questions. So again, do your best on these. Make sure you use your notes, your reference tables, and call me or Mr. Amiga or Mr. D or Mr. Winters if you have any questions on any of the labs. Again, that's it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more helpful videos from Mrs. Ritz.